we're kind of seeing drones in a really wide variety of roles on the battlefield. They're not taking over, but they're definitely turning into a lot of roles that historically be done by crewed aircraft. So for instance, instead of using kind of a crewed fixed wing aircraft, you could now use a drone as a loyal wingman to augment fighters and kind of augment a kind of fighter formation through that. Any small rotary wing craft can essentially act as an immediate ISR drone, or even be mounted with a kind of an explosive charge and be a quite rudimentary loitering munition as well. I'm Matty Tonter, the Senior UAV Analyst at Shephard Group's Defence Insight team. I think fundamentally it's kind of turbocharged the market and really changed it quite significantly, and kind of expedited a lot of programs kind of more higher up in terms of priority. So I think it's kind of done that kind of directly and indirectly. So I think directly, obviously, there's been a lot of drone procurement programs related specifically to Ukraine, with a lot of NATO allies buying a lot of equipment for Ukraine, particularly through the International Drone Coalition. I think they've kind of said that they want to spend well over £1 billion before the end of the year on drones for Ukraine, and obviously Ukraine has bought a lot of drones for itself as well. So I think from that kind of sense, very directly, it really has kind of turbocharged the drone market. Also as well, a lot of countries surrounding Ukraine and kind of bordering Russia particularly, that conflict has also kind of advanced the drone programs that they've got going for themselves. So I think a kind of a good example of that is Poland, who, following Russia's invasion, instantly kind of looked into procuring the MQ-9A Reaper from General Atomics. That turned into a lease agreement before they could, as a bridging solution, before they could get the MQ-9B, which is something they announced a contract award for just a few weeks ago, which is a contract of well over 300 million. So I think kind of directly it has had quite a mass effect on the kind of the drone market and really turbocharged it. I think indirectly as well, it's also kind of affected the market quite significantly, as kind of the conflict has highlighted the importance of drone in kind of modern symmetrical conflict or near symmetrical conflict as well. And I think a kind of good example of that would be that France, in its announcement of its twin procurement contracts for loitering munitions, its La Renée and its Calabria effort, cited Russia's invasion and the importance of drones in that as well. So I think kind of indirectly and directly, it has kind of really contributed to a turbocharging of the drone market. Definitely at the minute, and definitely with Ukraine, as you said. Ever since that conflict started, there's been a lot of charity efforts and kind of efforts from the Ukrainian government and military for people to donate household, civilian, commercial off-the-shelf drones. Any small rotary wing craft can essentially act as an immediate ISR drone, or even be mounted with a kind of an explosive charge and be a quite rudimentary loitering munition as well. So yeah, there definitely is a lot of crossover between the civilian and kind of military drones in that sense, yeah. Fundamentally, we're kind of seeing drones in a really wide variety of roles on the battlefield, and kind of, they're not taking over, but they're definitely kind of using it, or kind of turning into a lot of roles that would historically be done by crewed aircraft. So for instance, instead of using kind of a crewed fixed wing aircraft, you could now use a drone as a loyal wingman to augment fighters and kind of augment a kind of fighter formation through that. You could also use drones for, and people are using them for, long-range ISR, which is again something that would be conventionally done by a crewed aircraft, and even strike roles as well. In terms of rotary wing platforms, they can also do quite a lot of the roles that helicopters have traditionally done. So particularly in kind of ship-to-ship movement of cargo and ship-to-shore movement of cargo, there's a lot of movement now and a lot of programs that are kind of moving towards seeing if drones can do that in a more cost-effective and manpower efficient way than a helicopter can. I think the US Navy has one of the biggest programs with that, the Blue Water Maritime Logistics Program or something like that, which is kind of one of the key programs and kind of driving that as well. A lot of drones are also being used to instead of traditional infantry equipment as well. So instead of perhaps using a mortar or kind of an immediate kind of strike capability like that for the infantry, you can use a loitering munition, you can use an FPV drone with a charge on it, or something like that, which gives kind of infantry units a more immediate strike capability as well. So yeah, fundamentally I think drones are being used for lots of capabilities and are really being used in a variety of roles. So definitely the forerunner in the low wingman programs is the kind of the US Air Force Collaborative Combat Aircraft, or the CCA. That's kind of one of the first major ones to really be advanced, and it's one of the first major ones to reach kind of a high level of maturity. A lot of the key players in the industry are involved in that program, including people like General Atomics, Anduril, and other big companies like that. So if there's any low wingman program to watch out, it's definitely that one. And that program has a sister as well in the US Navy to do similar things, but obviously with a slight more maritime slant on it as well.
When can we expect to see them being used?
I think in terms of the CCA, the two companies have been tasked with producing production representative aircraft that I think are looking to be able to fly or at least be tested in around 2025 or 2026. But in terms of being used kind of in the field, I don't think low wingman programs will be seeing the full results of them until the 2030s. I think one of the big kind of lessons learned seems to be that there seems to be a drive towards drones being low cost and more on the disposable side than when they first entered the kind of the market and were used on the battlefields as well. I think Ukraine, as we kind of touched on before, has been kind of a driver of that. I think the need for drones to be disposable and low cost to produce and produced in mass as well seems to be quite an important thing that is kind of a more recent development in the drone market, shall we say. And that ranges all the way from small FPV drones that cost around $100 to $200 each to multi-million loyal wingman drones. They still need to be low cost and kind of disposable if necessary, which I think is kind of been one of the key kind of drivers of the change in the drone market as well. Yeah, definitely. I think kind of one of the key highlights of that would be in mid-2023, the US DoD announced the Replicator 1 program, which was a program specifically to field thousands of disposable, low-cost, kind of attributable platforms, and thousands of them in order to better compete with China in terms of just raw mass of kind of UAVs and things like that. So yeah, I think that lesson has definitely been learned and is being impacted on by the major NATO nations. I think there's kind of two for me that stand out. As someone who's been kind of covering the drone industry for around 4 years, the announcement of the contract award for India's procurement of 31 MQ-9B drones from General Atomics is quite an exciting moment for me. It's kind of a program I've been reading about and writing about for 4 years. Just to see it eventually have that contract be signed and kind of fully in motion, it was quite exciting. And especially because in terms of value as well, it was one of the most valuable awarded contracts of the year. So I think that was quite an exciting moment for me to kind of finally write about that in terms of a contract award. And another one, as I've kind of previously mentioned, is that American Replicator effort. And kind of in contrast to the Indian program, just the speed that has been announced, and we've already had 2 batches of contract awards for that. One in May for the Switchblade 600, and then another one, I think in November, for a selection of 3 different platforms. I think it's kind of quite exciting that something can be announced and fielded kind of so quickly as well. I think in terms of kind of things we've already discussed as well, I think one of the kind of fertile grounds for the market next year will be the kind of advancement of early stages of major European nations kind of embarking on loyal wingman programs. We've already seen kind of the very early green shoots of this. Obviously, the Americans are kind of leading the way with the CCC effort for the US Air Force and the Navy. but also there's kind of symbols that that's coming to the Europe as well. For instance, Airbus released its Wingman prototype in the Berlin in the middle of the year, kind of aimed at Germany's expressed interest for a All Wingman program, but there's been no real kind of announcement of what that would look like. And I think kind of next year there'll be more like a mature expression of what those ideas are and what those requirements are for that program as well. And kind of even more recently as well, I think the French Minister of the Armed Forces announced in October that Dassault Aviation would be kind of producing a low wingman for the French Armed Forces for their future sixth generation fighter to work alongside that. Again, kind of very early stages, but I think kind of going forward to 2025, those programs will kind of mature more and there'll be more information around them, which would be an exciting thing for the market, I think. Generally for me at a trade show, one of the most exciting things is seeing drones there and kind of the mock-ups of them, especially if they're full scale. I think that's always quite exciting to get a real kind of scale of them, especially kind of the male platforms and the kind of the hail platforms as well, any of the large ones. Also, it's just kind of, for me, one of the exciting things is seeing a drone that I haven't wrote about and I don't know too much about, because I'm always quite interested in to kind of see what that company's offering and to see how that drone might differ from the other things that already exist in the industry. So I think for me, those are the kind of quite exciting things about going to trade shows, especially kind of the further away from the UK they are, the more interesting things that are kind of out there for me. So that's always quite exciting. Well, I'm going to IDEX, so hopefully that'll be a good one. I'm sure it will be. Other than that, I'm not too sure. So I think in terms of technology, kind of relating it back to kind of lower wingmans again and kind of a higher end platform, shall we say, I think kind of one of the really emerging kind of part of the drone industry at the minute is kind of autonomous control systems and autonomy in general. Especially that's kind of a key cornerstone of how a lot of these lower wingman programs will inevitably function when they get put into service. I think that's definitely kind of a part of the industry that's advancing quite quickly. I think, for instance, OpenAI announced that they were having a strategic collaboration with Anduril. I think that was announced a few weeks ago. And since Anduril is kind of one of the key players in that US Air Force CCA program, I think that's kind of definitely something to kind of keep an eye on over the next few years, definitely.